Hi, everybody. I'm Chad Poole. Welcome to another edition of the Northland Outdoors podcast. And boy, do we have a great conversation in store for you today. Retired Army Colonel Scott St. Sauver is with us. Scott has been just an unbelievable advocate for veterans and the outdoors for many, many years. Just an absolutely distinguished career in the armed forces. Was the post commander at Camp Ripley over in Minnesota for many years and started some unbelievable programs for veterans over there, and is still involved, even retired now, probably more involved than ever in telling the stories of American veterans. And so it's just a great conversation with Scott, and we're looking forward to that. But before we get to it, a quick reminder here: if you want all of this wonderful Northland Outdoors information, the video projects, all of the stuff from the outdoor writers, make sure you go to inform.com and subscribe. It costs next to nothing, folks, and it gives you just a wealth of news, weather, sports, and of course, Northland Outdoors. You don't want to miss a minute. Also, a reminder, make sure you tune in to the WDAY ABC North Dakota Network every Sunday night after the 10 o'clock news. And also, if you're in South Dakota, tune into KSFL TV out of Sioux Falls. And do not miss the next episode of Northland Outdoors Television. We've just got some great stuff going there this season, and you don't want to miss a minute. That's Sunday night, 10:35 on the WDAY, WDAZ, North Dakota ABC Network. Now, without further ado, let's join the conversation with Colonel Retired Scott St. Sauver. He is really, folks, an American hero, a guy that's been, had a great distinguished career in the military, and now continues to give back to those who served and work with those guys through the outdoors. Colonel Scott St. Sauver, retired Colonel Scott St. Sauver, joins us. Scott, how are you today? Thanks for joining us on Northland Outdoors Podcast.
I'm great, Chad. Great to be here.
So, first of all, where are you at right now? You living in the South Dakota land of lakes, the Great Lakes of South Dakota over there, and you were just saying the weather's been screwy this year, huh?
Well, I think it has been for everybody. I mean, I would suggest that, I live in Northeast South Dakota, so I live in the glacial lakes of South Dakota. I had the opportunity I grew up here. I grew up in Britton, South Dakota, a little town out here in the Northeast South Dakota, and met my wife when I was in third grade. And we started dating when we were in high school and got married. And then the military kind of came along, and I ended up, obviously, after about 10 years in the Minnesota Guard or South Dakota Guard, I ended up getting a full-time job in the Minnesota National Guard. So I moved to Minnesota and lived there, over 30 years. And so I have quite a history with the state of Minnesota, obviously, but having the opportunity to retire for me meant coming home. I love Northeast South Dakota. I still come to Minnesota and fish and visit all the time. But my wife's parents are passed away, but my parents are still alive. My dad's 84, my mom's 82, and I'm the oldest sibling. And I really wanted to get home and spend some time with my dad, especially, and my mom. She's not much of a fisher, but my dad gave me that passion. And so be able to come back home now and take care of my dad a little bit and get him out on the water in my off times, and he helps me get ready for shows. He helps me get ready for guiding. He's always ready if the fish are biting. If the fish aren't biting, he's not nearly as excited.
I get it. Let's backtrack a little to the military service, and thank you so much for all of those years of service, Scott. We all appreciate it, but 37 and a half years in the service, and a big portion of that over at Minnesota's Camp Ripley, where you were post commander for, I forget how many.
Yeah, almost 10 years. Yeah, 8 years.
10 years post commander. So what drew you to that, to the military to start with? How did you get into that? And
I don't know if we could spend a whole podcast just on that. So I'll give you the abridged version. I had no intentions of joining the military. none at all.
Okay.
And my buddies, 4 of them from the little town of Britain that I did everything with, that we were in sports together, we hunted together, we fished together. They all joined the National Guard, and they just kept on me and on me and on me about joining the National Guard. And so I, about 6 months after they did, our senior year of high school, I decided to join. And I went for the college money, and I committed to 6 years. That was what I was going to do, 6 years in the Guard, and I'm going to be done. Now, those buggers, they all got out between 6 and 15 years. I stayed for 37 and a half. So somewhere along the line, I got tricked, and here I was with a whole career. It was amazing. I can't say enough good about my military career, but that's how I got started. And so I spent 10 years as a traditional guardsman when I was in college. And when I just got out of college, I actually have a bachelor's degree in agriculture park management and ran golf courses. So I was on a golf course out in Wyoming for a while. I came back to Watertown, South Dakota, and I ran the golf course there. Had the opportunity to go down to Sioux Falls at Southeast Technical Institute, and I taught golf course management and got my master's degree in curriculum instruction. And so that was where I was going, was school teaching. Still in the Guard, enjoying the Guard. And in the meantime, I had become an officer. I was 10 years enlisted and became an officer. And then I happened to have the summers off because I was a school teacher. And so I went over to Camp Ripley. Of course, we went there in the South Dakota Guard all the time to do our annual training. And I was an artilleryman. We're the guys that everybody in Brainerd knows makes all the noise all summer long, and keeps everybody up. That's us. I was one of those guys. I still am. If they'd let me blow stuff up, I still would. But they don't let me do that anymore. So, but I had the opportunity to work up there during a summer annual training for the 34th Infantry Division out of Minnesota and their artillery units. And so, being a school teacher, I went up there and worked for the summer, and I fell in love with the place as a worker and what they were doing and the safety involved with artillery fire and the precision and how the base was interacted with all that. And I got to know some great people at that time, and lo and behold, a job became available at their range control. And they called me and asked me if I would apply, and I did, and I got the job. And that's how I ended up at Camp Ripley. And then I spent, the next 20 years between Camp Ripley and the Minneapolis, St. Paul. I did my time in the cities as an operations officer in their J3 operations shop, and back to Camp Ripley, and then deployed to Iraq twice. And so I really had a full career. And I got to culminate my career after I came home from my second deployment to Iraq. They offered me the position of post commander. I was promoted to full colonel, and I took that job and absolutely loved that job. It was the best job anyone could ever ask for. I had a 53,000 acre playground, and it was all mine, and I loved it. And I controlled the airspace. So if I didn't want anybody in it, they didn't have to be in it if they weren't working there. And the resources that it provided to veterans and to our soldiers outside of the military training, which was obvious, is what was really my passion while I was the commander.
Yeah, and let's shift gears to that a little bit. The 53,000 acres, I'm very familiar with it because I live just a couple of miles from there. Amazing piece of land, and you, during your time, really started utilizing that resource for bringing veterans in, not just to train militarily, but for the outdoors. How did that all come about? Is that just because of your history of being an outdoorsman yourself, or?
Well, I think that was some of it. I think that there's always been commanders and having remember, Camp Ripley is a state-owned training facility. So the ground is owned by the state of Minnesota. So it always had that amazing deer hunt that everybody talked about, right?
Sure.
Everybody wanted to come to that archery hunt at that time because there was such a large deer on Camp Ripley in that kind of environment, to have the opportunity to shoot a great big deer. And that was a public hunt. And so the DNR was pretty excited about that. And of course, on Camp Ripley, we have the DNR Enforcement Center. So I was interacting with the DNR enforcement officers all the time. And we had State High Patrol Academy there. So we had a lot of state influence. And then, of course, we had a number of state employees. So that was kind of natural. I think what made it for me was my deployments. So when I deployed the first time in 2005, I took a battalion. I was a major at the time in a battalion out in Montevideo, Minnesota. And it really encompassed the western part of the state, and those guys, when we got over to theater, in small groups. It was a beginning of the talk about what things we miss from home. And of course, when you talk about home, you always miss family. That was always, the first thing. But for us, it was the outdoors. I mean, it's just a natural part of who we are is Northern United States citizens, as upper Midwest citizens, is that we love the outdoors. And so missing deer camp in Minnesota is like, it's like missing a wedding or a funeral. I mean, it's not something you do, right? I mean, when deer camp comes, you're there. And it's an event. It's not just deer hunting. It's an event. And, fishing opener. So I come from South Dakota. We didn't have that. We fished all the time. I thought, what do you mean opener? That means it has to close, right? So, there's different rules, different places you go. So fishing opener, those kind of things. So my soldiers were talking about it, interacting with it, watching videos from it all the time. And then when I came back to Minnesota, it was, of course, re-engaging with that. And then when I went back in 2009, I was a battalion commander of the same unit, of the same battalion, group of about 800 soldiers. And my soldiers were outdoors nuts. I mean, they just, so, I mean, I have a commander. One of my former commanders is down here in Webster, South Dakota now. He retired, moved back to Minnesota, back South Dakota. And this kid was a duck hunting fool. I mean, he's just a fool. And I, in the middle of the night, we did all our convoy operations. I ran a convoy security battalion, and we did all our convoy operations in the middle of the night. So our soldiers were on the move. We had units getting ready to go out, coming back. And so you'd interact with your soldiers all night long. And I go down to one of my company headquarters, and I can hear the most god awful sound coming from the headquarters. And I go walk in, I'm like, what is going on? And they got duck calls. There's like 25 of them blowing duck calls, and they're on a screen with Chad Belding, who is the host of the Foul Life. Yeah. And so we had met Chad somewhere along the line, and Chad would come on every week and teach these guys how to blow duck calls. And so that's an example of the kind of passion that these kids had for wanting to get back home, right? And back home, doing the things they love. Well, we had a group of kids that watched fishing videos all the time. I love to fish. So my thing was I wanted to learn to fly fish. And I thought, well, what better place to learn to fly fish than Iraq? Maybe not, right. But by golly, I was going to try it. So I went down to we had a bunch of old stored equipment and backed up equipment. And I found this piece of, I guess it was a piece of a radio antenna. And it was a thin and it was long consistency. So I thought, well, I can make this work as a fly line. And then I took the inside cord out of a 550 parachute cord, and it looked like a fly line. And so I tied it on, and I got some yarn, and I found some yarn, and I put it on the end. And then I would put targets around our billet area, and then I would try to cast into those targets. And I'll never forget, one day I was out there casting away, and I whipped that baby back, and I made a beautiful cast. And it landed right on the head of one of the third country nationals that come around the corner. Oh, no. This young Filipino lady didn't know what was going on, and it was exciting. And I got to learn how to fly fish, and I watched a whole bunch of fly videos. So I can still take a loop like you've never seen. I can throw it into the trees. I can do all those things. But by golly, when you're away, you appreciate those things. That's my point. Yeah. You're away. You learn to appreciate those things more than you'll ever imagine.
Yeah, I think you're talking about that being over in theater and mutual acquaintance. I believe Ryan Deshane. I think you know Ryan. He came. He was over and he came. He has pictures of him catching. I think it was carp or something out of a pond in one of Saddam's former palaces or something like that. The guy
I have that waypoint actually. So
you got the waypointed. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't want to go back there right now, but
that's right. Yeah, hopefully you never get to go back and use that waypoint, or you never have to anyway. So
so then you talk like that. I mean, he's got that same passion, right? And so Ryan's a perfect example of that passion, right? So I did the same thing. I'll never forget. I found a pond. We were located in Taji, Iraq, the first deployment, and that's where Chemical Ali's headquarters was. So it was a giant structure, blown out building. But behind there was a pond, and I was walking by there one day. I just happened to be walking by, and I saw just like bluegills rippling on top of the water. I'm like, oh my God, there's fish in there. And so I immediately ran back, and I said, we got to find out this fish. So I had an interpreter. We had an Iraqi interpreter that was working for us, and I said, okay, I got to have a fishing rod. I got to have some fishing line. I got to have a hook. And I said, I just need the hook to be fairly small. I think these fish are small, but can you do it? He goes, yes, sir. I'll get the best pole in Baghdad. So he was so excited. The next day he comes back from Baghdad from market. That pole is a 14-foot surf casting rod.
Oh, no.
So, and it's got like 80-pound test on it.
Sure,
but
of course.
by golly, the hook was small enough. I thought I could make it work. So I made it work, and I thought, well, I can use this like a cane pole. So I went to the mess hall and I got hot dogs, and I took it down to that pond and I started catching fish. And I don't know what they were. They probably glowed in the dark. It didn't matter. They're like 4 to 6 inches long, and you catch them as fast as you could. Well, my commander at the time was from Tennessee. He was the commander of the brigade from Tennessee. So when I briefed him that night, and at the end of the briefing, I said, "Hey, sir, I found a place to fish. If you got any soldiers that want to fish." And he looked at me. He took me after me. He said, "St. Sauver, stay after the meeting." So I did. I'm like, "Oh, I'm in trouble." So I go up to him, I tell you, "Sir, what's up?" And he's like, "Son, I like to fish more than I like to eat. So if you're kind to me," he goes, "I'm going to put you outside the wire and never let you back in." I'm like, "No, sir, we can do this." So every Sunday morning, before what we had was called stand to, Colonel McMillan and I and a couple other guys would go down and fish.
That puts that's a little different pressure guiding than what you have over there in Northeast South Dakota. When
it is, yeah.
You're either producer, you're out there and walking the streets. Yeah, no, that's.
No. But we caught fish, so it all worked out. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the programs then that specifically that got started and are still going on over at camp. Trolling for Troops was one of them. And that has been just an amazing success. I've been in a couple of those and fantastic. How did that get started? And tell us what that is exactly.
Yeah. So when I got back and I was given the opportunity to command Camp Ripley, I sat down with my environmental team, and they're a great group of guys. And Marty Skoglund, everybody that's been around Camp Ripley knows Marty. Our environmental center is named for Marty and his crew. They just do a phenomenal job balancing the military training needs with the environment itself. And we had such a resource at Camp Ripley. I thought, well, I need to do something. We were doing a great deer hunt. We had just started we got started on the turkey hunts. Turkeys became pretty prolific at Camp Ripley, and I was pretty excited about that. And we had some guys that were just super into turkey hunting. And so we started that for the disabled veterans, and then we started that for soldiers. But the one I'm most proud of, obviously, is Trolling for the Troops. And my idea is I wanted to help soldiers get rid of some of their feelings, to share some of their experiences, and I wanted it to be all services, all ages. So my idea was to bring a group of 25 soldiers, currently current soldiers, together with 25 veterans of any era, any service, put them in a boat with a guide, either on the Mississippi River or on Mille Lacs. At the time, that's where we started, was Mille Lacs, and let them just fish together. Tell the guide up front, hey, the guides are your job is to just let them have a good time. Some fishing's fishing. Sometimes you catch them, sometimes you don't, but we're super lucky that we live in an area that generally you can catch them. And so those guides are fantastic. Well, I'd made them I'd started a relationship probably a few years before that with Mark Kortz. And Mark was a professional angler at the time on the FLW Walleye Tour. He introduced me to a number of anglers on that tour, to include, Kevin McCoy and Dean Arnoldson, and gosh, I can go on and on and on. But that led me to Gary Roach. It led me to, it led me to Al Lindner. It led me to all of those people when I came up with this idea that would help. And so I just started calling people and said, hey, can you help us do this? Do you think we can do this? And Mark was super excited. And he said, yeah, we can do this. We can get all kinds of people. So I sold it to my staff, and I sold it to I started talking to the veteran service orgs. Well, they have a organization called V4V, Veterans for Veterans, which is a trust made up of the DAV, the American Legion, the VFW, and the Order of the Purple Heart, Military of the Purple Heart. And they have money that they made in this trust fund that from selling Big Island down in the cities. And that was a perpetuating trust and a way to fund an event like this. So they became the major fund behind it. And then Camp Ripley's environmental programs helped support it. And then the base support came from that as well. So that's how it started. And it just, after the first year, I was pretty concerned it wasn't going to, do what we wanted it to do. It wasn't going to meet the intent, but it just blew me away. I mean, it's amazing, Chad, when you get a soldier in a boat, and it doesn't, and a perfect example would be a 17, 18, 19-year-old soldier. Could have been deployed, may not have been, and a World War II veteran at that time when I first started, but now a Vietnam veteran, most certainly. And getting them just to interact, because they don't have to build a bond of trust, because they both served or served. I mean, once you've served, you always serve. And so they never had to build a trust. And I think not only did it help the young soldier, because he could feel better about, what he was doing, who he's doing it with, and kind of tell where he's at in his life, but it allowed the veteran to let loose a little bit and tell them what they learned, what their pitfalls were, what bothered them, whether that be in combat, and especially combat veterans, because they need to talk. And our Vietnam veterans suffered the horrific time of our life and our national shame that they were shunned by the population. They were shunned by politics, when politics should never drive the attitude of the soldier and how a soldier serves, because they didn't choose that. Though a lot of those guys were drafted, sent to Vietnam, did their job, came back, and they came back with a lot of scars. And so I wanted those guys to open up, and so I wanted to make sure we were thanking them, number one, but number two, make sure we were interacting with them every day. And I made it my mission to make sure that we were forcing that interaction. So where you can go on a lot of veteran group events, and there's some great nonprofits doing great things across the Midwest, especially in Minnesota, for veterans. This is unique in that it always combines the currently serving soldier with the veteran. And then I had Eric Alton and his great river guides with those darn river pros. They drive around on the river like they're going crazy, and they have a ball. Yep. They can handle the what I want to say here. They can handle the disabilities. We understand what the soldiers' needs are, what the veterans' needs are, and then we could match them up. And so what started is that my goal was to, I hope this goes until I'm done with command. Well, I had to miss it this year, and it just broke my heart. I mean, I had another event I had to be at, and I missed it. And they called me, right? So I got Tom Cremeen called me. He's like, "Where are you? I mean, how come you're not here? It's your program." I'm like, "Listen, it's Camp Ripley's program. It's your program. It's everybody that's involved's program. I'm just proud that I was able to get it going." So, but I will be there next year. I promise. I already put it on my calendar. There's nothing knocking it off my calendar next year, because that was the first year I missed.
Well, that's what's amazing about that event too, is that it really has nothing to do with fishing. I mean, it is. I mean, that's what you do. But I know, a lot of the guys that have helped out with guide boats and so on and so forth, and they talk about the stories and the conversations that go on. And we'll catch a fish now and then, but that's amazing. It truly is a great event. And when you create something, Scott, that can live on without you there, then you've done it, right? It's doing its own thing.
That's right. It runs itself, and those guys that take care of it, that are taking care of it now, are doing a great job. And I'm super lucky that I had, following me was Lowell Cruz, who has the same passion that I do. And in fact, he's going to be at my house here in about 20 minutes, just because we got to go. So I still keep track of, he's moved back to the Dakotas now and is retired. And now Troy Fink, who was one of my commanders in Iraq, he is now the base commander. So, it's as big as the organization is, it's small. And the people that we've impacted have carried on. So now even with the guides, what started as a core group of guides is now spread out to a whole new group of anglers in central Minnesota. And people just want to take veterans out, because you're exactly right, Chad. The fishing is secondary, but it's always good. And those guys are so good at those lakes. And if I always tell people, if you haven't fished the upper Mississippi and had the opportunity to do it in a jet boat, then you need to get out there. And if you've not fished Mille Lacs in the last 5 years, then you are missing it, dude. I was just over there for the Champions Tour by Classic Bass. I host that too. I do their on stage stuff, and I do their out on the water stuff. And I mean, we caught 470 bass in 6 hours. Okay. And eight bass, 40 pounds. It's ridiculous. And they caught more walleyes than they caught bass, I think. So, I know it. It's a controversial lake. I know all of that stuff, and I've been around it my whole time I was at Camp Ripley, and I have great opinions on that on the side. But that fishery is unbelievable.
Yeah, no question about it. It's the best smallmouth fishery in the world, as far as I'm concerned.
Me as well.
The disabled hunts and stuff, you mentioned them just quickly too, but that's another big deal too. And I recall we did when I was doing the show for Fleet Farm a few years back, I remember we did a show over there and talked about that. But some of the just great inventive ways you have of getting these guys in stands and so on and so forth. I mean, maybe it's only could happen at a military base like that, but those disabled hunts have been a great success too, haven't they?
Yeah, and you know, I learned a lot from those disabled hunts and how to handle disabled veterans in a boat, how to handle them safely in a blind, and those guys that work with them every day are amazing. I mean, I don't know what we do without the organizations like the Paralyzed Veterans of America. They are killing it, you know, when it comes to taking care of the needs of those vets. And a lot of times they come with extra things. They have to have a nurse, they have a family member, they have to have somebody, and you have to have significant patience. Now, one thing I will tell you the military in many cases does not have is significant patience. But those hunts truly take even soldiers and volunteers to a new level of patience, of understanding why it's important for someone to have a quality event. And I'll always say this, it doesn't matter what you're doing. A quality event does not need a kill. It does not need a fish. It needs all of the other aspects to come together. Now, all of those things that you get, the opportunity can be way better than the culmination. And so every event starts out with a get together. Every event starts out with people thanking people for what they've done and how they've done it and telling stories. And it's just a camaraderie that you can't replace. And so that's probably the biggest thing. When you put them on Camp Ripley, the nice thing about that, it's all in one place and they're comfortable. I've always said that about military bases. My wife and I, when we travel, we live in Florida in the winter. I stay on military bases. And she's like, well, you know, we just never stay at the hotel. And I'm like, well, we do. We stay at hotels and military bases. Why? Because I'm around people that I'm comfortable around. You know, maybe the you know, non-military people may not be nearly as comfortable. They're a little tense on military bases once in a while, but and things have changed. But I am. And I think those veterans are the same way. They're much more comfortable when they're in an environment where it's somewhat controlled as opposed to free for all. And so that means a lot. Now I'm involved in another event outside of Minnesota, down in southeast South Dakota, down in Chamberlain, South Dakota. It's called the Niemeyer Fishing Tournament. It's run by the Paralyzed Veterans of South Dakota, and they're out of Sioux Falls. And then the firefighters out of the 3 states, Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, North South Dakota, they handle all the needs of the veterans. So you want to see something cool, that go back in American Heroes Outdoors and look at it. I just shot a show there last year with a 100-year-old World War II vet. But when they line the boats up in the morning and they lift those wheelchair vets up in the boat, and you've got young kids holding on to the straps, and they're setting those wheelchairs in the boats, and people with can't see, they're blind, disabilities like that, and you get to take them on the water, or they have a nurse with them. It's the one time a year for some of those guys to go out and do what they love, and that's get on the water fishing. So I can't say enough about the nonprofits out there that are doing these things for veterans, because they make a difference.
Yeah. So you go ahead and retire from your service, and then of course you're busier than you ever were when you were working, right? Quote unquote working right now. Right. So you mentioned American Heroes Outdoors, and folks, if you haven't seen it, please do your web search, find American Heroes. It's easy. Heroes Outdoors, and then watch the show. The episodes are fantastic. It's amazing. So tell me about where was the impetus for starting that program, and where can people find it? Just tell me about American Heroes Outdoors, how that all got going.
Yeah, you bet. So American Heroes Outdoors was started by my partner, Dave Morse. He's now First Sergeant David Morse. At the time, he was a E7 out in Bearcat Land out by Moorhead, Minnesota, and he lives in Park Rapids now. But Dave Morse had an idea that he wanted to start an organization like that. He had come up through Concordia University and worked at Shields, and he was good friends, connected with Jason Mitchell when he was younger. And he started this fledgling little program called American Heroes Outdoors. And it was a neat little idea. And I was about 2 years from retiring when I first came across it. He came up to Camp Ripley to one of the Trolling for the Troops. And so what I noticed was going on was I thought was interesting. And then I also thought, oh my goodness, I wonder if he knows all the rules of what you can and can't do as a military soldier in uniform when you're working outside of the military force. And so I brought him into the office. I asked him to come in and talk to me. And he came in and talked to me. We sat down and what was going to be a 10-minute conversation to kind of chew his butt ended up being a lifelong friendship. And when I got ready to retire, I had been sitting with Al Lindner one day. I think we were fishing up at South Long or something. And I asked Al, I said, do you think I have any talent at all that I could maybe do something like this? And he, of course, Al, he just went way off. You should be doing this every day. And I'm like, well, I don't need a full-time job. I just wondered if I might be pretty good at it. And so he brought me up. We actually did a pilot episode for a show up there, which taught me a lot. And boy, I tell you what, the Lindner crew, Jim and Al and Ron and Jeremy Smith, and I think Ryan had left by then, but Ryan was involved, and they just taught me a whole lot about they taught me a whole lot about the business in a short amount of time. So I went back to Dave when I retired and said, hey, I want in. Can I help? And so Dave and I sat down, and when I retired in 2017, actually the year before, I actually asked the Guard if I could participate, and they allowed me to do that because I needed to basically have a second job. And so they allowed me to do that, which I was very appreciative of. And I started working with Dave, and we started deciding what American Heroes should be. And it really truly is just telling the stories of our heroes. That's it. Just that it was never meant to be a fishing show. It was never meant to be a hunting show. It was always meant to be an outdoor show, because I believe you heal veterans one at a time, and you got to look them in the eye, and they have to look in your soul, and you have to make a connection. And that's how you heal. That's how you heal. Now, the outdoors is an incredible mechanism for that, right? It doesn't matter if you're in the military or a first responder or whatever. It is a mechanism for healing at that level. And it's spiritual. Call it what you want, but I think it's spiritual in many ways. And so Dave and I hit it right off, and we decided to redo the organization a little bit, try to grow it a little bit. At that time, he was fledgling at that time it was Fox Sports North. And so we got with Jason Mitchell. Jason was editing our stuff. Jason was helping us walk through. I was recently retired, so I was super excited because I was retired, but I wasn't dead. So I thought I maybe should do something. So we got going, and I've been, 2017 till now. So, and I told him I'd give him 5 years, and I think I'd been here longer than that. But I did tell him I'm 65, I'm retiring. That's it. These kids are younger, they're stronger, faster. But I love it. American Heroes tells the stories of our true heroes in the outdoors. We do anything. We love to fish. We love to hunt. We love to bike. We love to shoot. You name it, we'll try it. And we love to support other nonprofits. One of the things that we didn't want to do was duplicate what the nonprofits were already doing. A perfect example would be Fishing with Vets. Fishing with Vets does a phenomenal job getting vets out fishing. But what an opportunity for me to get with Fishing with Vets, another group of veterans, and tell their story. Who is fishing with vets? Tell stories about their people, and get out on the water with them and show people what they can get if they'll just get out of their chairs, get involved with these organizations. Memories Made Outdoor is just started. I'm going to shoot a show with them this fall. I've been all over the United States. I'm going to be shooting a show this winter with one of the best Everglades tarpon guides in the world. His name is Captain Ray Van Horn. He's had his own show for years called The Gypsy Angler. He's 70 years old. He's cut his guiding down. That man is the most amazing backwater guide you'll ever meet. And I have a veteran that has Parkinson's disease, and he's only in his early 50s from his service, and has struggled with getting that service connected, and has struggled with becoming disabled. And he's one of my best friends. He's from South Dakota, but I've been away from him for probably 35 years, and we reconnected. So I will be bringing him down to Florida, because Ray said that to go backcountry like that in the Everglades, we have to basically crawl on our bellies or lay on the bottom of the boat to get into some of these places to fish tarpon and snook. So we're going to film that show with him, with Jerry this weekend. His name's Jerry Thompson. So I can't tell you how excited I am. But those are the opportunities. We've partnered with, Shields is a big sponsor of ours. So they always have been from day one. And we do Shields Hometown Hero, which we do 12 stories from the local Shields network. We just have the Shields network. They give us the people that potentially could be a hero, whether they be, and we don't just do veterans, we do first responders, firefighters, law enforcement officers. We've done everybody from nurses during COVID, to anyone. If there's so many, Chad, unsung heroes in our own neighborhoods that we would never know were heroes because they will never call attention. They're too humble for that. They would never say they did anything special, and yet we know they did. So those Shields Hometown Heroes for us, those 5-minute stories are dynamite because we get out into the local communities. We get out into the Shields network, which is growing every day. What became regional is now almost national with Shields as they continue to grow. And they become a big part. So then we hooked up with the DAV of Minnesota, Disabled American Veterans of Minnesota. And that's just begun. They started an outdoor program that they built out of soldiers that we know, that have retired and taken that program on. And that has been a resource beyond belief because the DAV does amazing things, not only in Minnesota, but across the United States at the regional level. And we're currently in conversations with the National DAV for hopefully the next stage of what American Heroes could be. Because we've moved now. So we've grown and we've continued to grow, and we have been morphing out. And what started as Dave and Scott's show and Eric Osberg helping us on the side, and Wes Gall. We ended up hiring Wes Gall as our first full-time employee. He edits our shows. He does all that work for us. We now have an administrative assistant. Her name's Kayla. She's amazing. She does it. And Dave coerced me into working 20 hours a month outside of volunteering to be the executive director. So instead of retiring, I seem to be getting more involved, which I don't know. Love, but here I am. So but it just continues to grow. So right now we moved over to the Sportsman's Channel. We're on Sundays at 1:00 is our primary run and we're that's a national feed, obviously. So that's opened up our aperture quite a lot. We stream on Waypoint Outdoor TV, obviously a free streaming act that comes on almost every TV you buy nowadays. We're on MOTV, which is a subscriber app that Sportsman's owns. We have our own YouTube channel. And then we are on Midco Cable across North Dakota, South Dakota, and upper and northern Minnesota. And we're probably showing 5-6 times a week there. So that's been a bread and butter for us. So we're still regionally, and we'll always be regional based, and we'll always be based out of that Fargo-Moorhead area. That's our core. I mean, I'm in South Dakota, they're up there, and we'll spread out. But that's how we tell our stories, and we continue to grow, and it's grown exponentially. Dave and I decided we never wanted to outkick our coverage. We wanted to keep our stories true and real. So vetting is the most difficult part for us. But it's opened, man. I tell you what, I never used to cry. Cry. And I can't shoot an episode unless I'm crying and laughing at the same time. And, I guess it's maybe good for my soul too, I suspect, but
absolutely.
The bottom line is that I figure if you have a successful episode, if you laugh and cry in 30-minute episode and you can reach out and hopefully help somebody get off the couch and get involved, that's what American Hero is all about. Now, we spurred off into a couple of things. We have Patriot Houses. Some people may have heard of them. We work with Smoky Hills Outdoors up in Park Rapids, and we have three big ice castle fish houses that go out in the wintertime for veterans to check out and to use over the winter. We have one now in South Dakota, and that's a really cool one because it's down in Webster, and it's on a lake called Reitz Lake, which is closed. It used to be open, but the state and the landowner are negotiating, so it's not even open this summer. But Jamie Reitz allows us to put an ice shack out there, and our veterans to go out there and actually fish and keep fish in the wintertime.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool. And then we have one up in Detroit Lakes, and we have one up by Park Rapids. Also, we now have two of those ice castles in the summertime. One goes to Fiddlesticks Resort on Mille Lacs, and the other one goes to Osage. And if you're a veteran family or veteran or first responder that wants to check that out for a weekend of camping or a week of camping, you just go onto our website, American Heroes Outdoors, and you go to the Patriot House Project, and you can sign up for those anytime. And they're free to you. They'll be open when you get there. If it's in the winter, the ice holes will be cut. A heater will be on. They'll have everything you need. You'll pick up your bait at the bait shop. If you're camping, everything's hooked up, everything's serviced, everything's clean, and you can go out and have a camping at no cost to any of those veterans. So that's a big program for us. And then the final one I'll mention is Hero Huts. So we have hunting blinds that are accessible, a couple on the ground, one up by, I think it's on a stand. We have them down at Wild Wings down by the cities. We have them up in Malacca, and they're taken care of by our ambassadors. And you can check those out. You just go to our Hero Huts, and then wherever we have one, if you want to hunt turkeys, if you want to hunt deer, archery or rifle, you just go and sign up for them, and they're out there for you. And I know Wes is a big proponent. Wes Gall does that for us. And you know, as our producer editor, he's quite a hunter, you know, and it's his passion. So we let him run with that, and we do that as well. So other than that, I don't do a whole lot. I'm retired.
Well, as a guy who's in the same business of making TV shows and so on and telling stories, which is what we do, folks, I can't impress on you enough to check out American Heroes Outdoors, because they really are tremendous. You're talking about tremendous guys and some tremendous, amazing stories. And Scott, Al was right. You are good at it. So I'm glad you got into it. Yes, no. I think we kind of touched, 65, but then what are you going to, you'll be even busier now. And then on top of this, folks, he does a little guiding up there in Northeast South Dakota. So how has that been going for you?
Well, so there's something I never thought I'd hear say in the same sentence, Scott St. Sauver guide. When I moved back up here, I reconnected with a lot of old friends and some new friends, I had known, I'd known some people around here that guided, and my parents knew, and they came up to me and approached me and said, "Hey, if we had overflow, would you mind helping us out?" Well, then I met Joe Honer down in Eden, and Joe said to me one night, we were just at Club Eden. Eden's a small town, right? You know everybody pretty fast.
Yeah.
So he came over and said, "Hey, if I ever had any overflow, would you want to do something?" And I did. I said, okay, maybe I'll try, but I didn't think I'd like it. I really didn't. I wasn't ready for that kind of pressure is what I would have considered it. I love to fish, and I love to watch people catch fish. But I have very high expectations. I think I should catch them every time, right? Always.
Right.
Every time.
Yep.
Which isn't necessarily the case. So I said I would. I took their overflow. And I told the two guides, they're competing guides services. And I said, if you fight, I'll quit. If you fight, if you argue about, whose client I'm taking over, who, whatever, I said, I won't do it, right? Because I just don't want to be not friends with either one of you. I don't want them. I'm never going to hang a shingle out and say, this is a guide service. I'll just take your overflow. Well, in 3 years, I'm booked, and my next year is already booked. And so my client base has become, by word of mouth, has become my client base. And of course they tell people tell people, how this goes. And so anyway, from day one, I said, I'm at 65, I'm quitting. My wife and I want to see some of this country. I want to get a little motorhome and drive east to west, north to south. I want to see this country I spent my whole life, defending, working for. And I want to do it while I'm young enough to do it. So I set 65. Now it's interesting when you talk about guiding, my clients are all like, yeah, but you'll do it for us. So, no, remember, at 65, I'm quitting. They're like, yeah, but you'll do it for us. I'm like, no, I'm telling you right now, but I'll set you up. But what I found, Chad, in guiding is that I love watching people catch fish. Sure. I love watching grandparents and a grandchild be successful. And success doesn't mean, the live well's full every day. And I learned that as well. And so I learned a lot from them, and they learned a lot from me, I guess, in that, in South Dakota, it's a fishing mecca. I mean, I love fishing walleyes, and 90% of the time I can have my walleyes in the boat before noon, and we fish 2 lakes. That's the other thing nice about Northeast South Dakota. I can fish 2 lakes a day. I can fish 3 lakes a day. If there's no bite in one lake, I go to another. There's 25, 30 lakes within 30 miles a year that all have fishing and all have good fishing, different times of day, different times of year. So I just love watching people be successful. I don't know. It's grown on me, and now I can't imagine. Though I'm telling them at 65, I'm done. Yeah. Because I don't like the days like we were just talking earlier. When I fished one day with some guys, they drove all the way up here from Arkansas, and the wind was blowing 55 miles an hour. I mean, 50 mile an hour gusts. And I'm sorry, but it's hard to find a place to fish in 55 mile an hour gusts. And I told them, and they said, no, can you try? And I said, I'll try. So we went out and we found this little lake with the biggest trees I could find to block that wind, and we stuck it out and we fished and fished and fished. And I'll be darned if we didn't catch all our walleyes and 50 some pike that day. So nice. You never know, right? But at the same time, I've always told people I don't want to be unsafe either. And sometimes even on these prairie lakes, it can be unsafe when it gets it's like that. So that's been challenging this year. Though the fishing has been fantastic. If you've never been to Northeast South Dakota fishing, I would like to tell you there isn't any fish here. Over there, you got plenty of fish. There's a lot of fish over there. And it doesn't matter what time. If you're a Missouri River guy and you like the river, go out to the Missouri River, because the Missouri River is where I grew up fishing. My dad, believe it or not, I grew up on Roy Lake, which you're familiar with, Northeast South Dakota. We had a cabin. Yeah. My dad would come home from trucking, and we'd go all the way to the Missouri River to a cask on the weekend. I'm like, Dad, what are we doing? We've got all these fish up in Northeast South Dakota. He goes, yeah, we can fish them anytime. And away we go. And he loved the river. God, he loved fishing out the river. And the fishing out there is phenomenal. But the fishing up here, if you like multi-species fishing, you'll find nowhere like it in the world. So we have phenomenal smallmouth bass fishing. We have phenomenal largemouth bass fishing. I was fishing on a little lake that it couldn't have been more than 600 acres. And if any of the Champions Tour Classic bass guys hear this, I am not a bass fisherman. You know this. Okay? But I went over there the other day because I had a husband and wife that loved to catch largemouth. And I started throwing topwaters on a lake that's incredibly weedy. I don't know, Chad. I don't know anything about throwing topwater. I threw it out there and reel it back in. And
you just named it.
I caught 35 largemouth and then took them over there and watched them have the time of their life catching largemouth bass. So, I had a group come up here from Nebraska and they wanted pike, and I begged them to keep only 12 because after I cleaned 12 pike, if you've ever, taken the white bones out of pike, I can't feel my finger anymore after I take it. They caught 25 that I had clean, and they were all bigger than 25 inches. And I'm like, oh my God. But you do it because they love it, and you see and I know they won't waste them, right? So our pike fishing is phenomenal up here. It is just unbelievable. And our crappie fishing, our bluegill fishing, it's just, that's what I'm trying. My grandkids are coming here tonight. They'll start tonight. And so, I've had guys calling me, wanting me to guide all weekend. I'm like, no, this is for my grandkids. So we'll be out catching bluegills. I'll guarantee it. That's what we're doing. So those little buggers, they love to catch bluegills. And, it doesn't matter the species. If you like white bass, oh my gosh, we have giant white bass out here. So and then the fall comes. And then when the fall comes, the perch start to gang up. And then the perch fishing starts. And then, South Dakota in the winter, once that ice hits, when I go to Florida, when I close up and I head to Florida, those nuts that come out and fish those big perch, they'll show up in groves. So it's quite a resource.
It is. You've just described, I think, you talk about your love of watching people succeed and catch fish and something. But you know what? That's the teacher in you, I think, Scott. And I think that's what's kind of guided you all the way through. You felt the same way, I'm sure, when you were running Camp Ripley, loving to see the guys succeed and loving to see the troops succeed with your programs over there. And now with American Heroes and guiding and all of that, it's just been wonderful. I know you got people coming, so I'm going to let you go, but this has been just an amazing conversation. And I so appreciate you joining me and sharing all of this with you, with all of us, and, continued success in your feet up on the chair retirement years.
And thank you, Chad, because I got to tell you, I'm a Facebook stalker. I'll admit it, and I watch the stuff you're doing with your dad and out there, and that is what it's about. if you're out there sitting in your chair, if you're listening to this and you're wondering what you should do, man, get somebody out fishing. When I go to Florida, I don't guide. I just fish. I live on a canal. I live in Punta Gorda, Florida, but I love to take people fishing. And my wife said something to me smart a couple of years ago. She said, don't fish alone. Never fish alone. You don't need to. Number one, it's not safe. You're getting older. Number two, somebody that you could have took out needs that to go out. So in the wintertime, I just grab guys and take them fishing. And so if you got a spot in your boat, I should never see you on the lake by yourself. And chances are if I see you, I'll pull up and go, why are you by yourself? Why don't you throw somebody else in your boat? Because that's what it's about. Get somebody out there fishing. And you see these kids on shore, they're full of excitement. They want to fish, and that's our future, right? I mean, I work for Scott Bonema and Champions Tour, and if you know Scott Bonema at all, that man is passionate about young anglers and sharing bass fishing with the next generation of responsible anglers, and that's how strongly I feel about that stuff. So I appreciate it, buddy. And anytime you get over here, you got to give me a call. I'm not going to say you might be the fifth guy in the boat, but we'll find a place for you.
I'm there. Scott St. Sauver, thank you so much, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care, Chad.
And thanks again, Scott. It was just wonderful to have you with us. And thanks again for your incredible career of service to our country. And as it continues and telling the stories of American veterans. We really appreciate you being on the Northland Outdoors podcast today. Folks, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you want more of it, make sure you get over to inforum.com and subscribe. Get all of that wonderful information at your fingertips at all times, including everything Northland Outdoors. And also another quick friendly reminder, don't forget to tune in to the next episode of Northland Outdoors Television all across the North Dakota ABC network and KSFL TV out of Sioux Falls down in South Dakota. It'll be another fantastic episode this week, so make sure you tune in for all of that. And that'll do it for this time. We appreciate you joining us on the Northland Outdoors podcast. I'm Chad Kuhl, and we will see you in our Northland Outdoors.